Hello guys, it's me, Slavic Affairs, and today we're gonna be talking about a topic I've wanted to talk about for quite some time, but I've had a bit of a shitty period to say the least, so I took a bit of pause. Anyways, don't mind my voice, I have a little bit of cold, let's go. Slavic people and Vikings. I pretty much believe everyone has heard of Vikings somewhere in their life, either when they were a kid and they dressed as one for the masquerade, in primary school, or with the popular series Vikings. We surely all know the following things about Vikings. They were hairy, they were badass, lived in wooden huts, had funny/weird looking helmets, traveled by sea with style, pillaged, killed, raped, enslaved. Okay, they were fucking cool, alright? But not so many know of Slavic people. On first sight, Slavs weren't all that different from the Vikings. I mean, they were literally equally hairy, badass, lived in wooden huts and were pagans. As a matter of fact, look at that picture. That's Thor and that's Perun. The left Thor was a supreme god of Vikings and the one on the right, Perun, was a supreme god of pagan Slavs. They look fucking the same, see what I mean? So what exactly was the difference between Vikings and Slavs? Well, while Vikings had their hands full with pillaging and killing that later led to conquering and, okay, gotta give them credit, reshaping Europe as a continent, Slavic people remained in the shadows, sort of say. But today Slavic people populate an enormous part of Europe and successor states of Vikings don't. One might ask, how is that so? Well, I've read many articles and posts where people compare Slavic people to slaves due to similarities between the English word Slav and word slave. But my question to those is, how come quote-unquote slaves today represent the biggest ethnic group in Europe, the biggest white population in the world, my friends? To answer all of that, let's go back in time. Let's explain part by part so you will fully understand, okay? Vikings are typically associated with Scandinavia, and that's okay, because Vikings were a Scandinavian thing. The word itself comes from a Scandinavian language and there's no debate about that. The word Viking means Norse seafarers who raided and traded and all that. But Vikings also existed outside of Scandinavia. I'm referring to Kievan Rus Vikings, for example, also known as Varangians. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but whatever. If you're a Mountain Blade fan like myself, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the word since the fantasy faction Kingdom of Aegir is based on them, I think so. Anyways, the Varangians, they settled among many territories of modern Belarus, Russia and Ukraine between the 9th and 11th centuries. In the Kievan Primary Chronicle, a group of Varangians known as the Rus settled in Novgorod in 862 under the leadership of Rurik. So were Kievan Rus Vikings Slavic? Well, debatable. The Vikings that settled there weren't really, probably, but we need to know that the areas were already inhabited by Balts and Slavs before they arrived, so all that mixed together you get ancestors of people who now settle these areas. But let's continue the video. Before I've asked myself, how come Slavic people populate such an enormous land? Well, when early Slavs arrived to Europe, they started settling so rapidly mainly due to one very specific characteristic. Romans, for example, once they conquered a certain land and enslaved everyone, they never gave slaves a chance to integrate into society. Nobody really done that until Slavic people arrived. Slavic people, once conquered the land, were first to offer people a chance to integrate into society. I mean, it's not like you had much chance, integrate or die bitch, but hey, you had a chance. And that was the main feature why Slavic expansion was so rapid. So anyway, were Slavic people and Vikings similar? Nah, to some degree they were, but let's see, Slavic people kept more to themselves. Once they already conquered and settled the Europe. Vikings, for example, traded with slaves, Slavs did not. They had similar looks for sure, both were pale, hairy, had similar clothing and believed thunderstorm was actually a sign of Perun or Thor. They had similar instruments and symbolism. Vikings founded Iceland and then those Icelandic Vikings founded Greenland. They even reached the shores of Northern America. Slavs on the other hand defeated Golden Horde and well took a big nice piece of land in Europe and Asia. So Slavic people and Scandinavians do share some things. At the end of the day they were neighbors. They were both conquerors. They are both one of the palest people in Europe today. Hopefully Scandinavians will remain this way, if you know what I mean, wink wink. They still celebrate some pagan traditions to this day, but that's about it. They are today in fact quite different, but were they so different in the past? Nah, not really. So if you see a bearded dude with an axe, don't automatically assume that's a Viking, it could be an early Slav, or just some Bosnian farmer fighting bears, or Russian, or Polish who literally jumped in the cage to fight a fucking bear. The Slavic people, as it seems, really have a thing for fighting bears. Anyways, thank you for watching, yo. If you like the video, subscribe, like, share, watch again, whatever you want. Thank you again, and I'll see you again.